Massive pile of
Nothing.
pluck.
None.
Now, timer for
0 second.
have a play and see if we get something good.
Heyo, here we have a bonus video. Because I am at the time of you watching this, off in the middle of England getting surgery, I decided to leave this here to entertain you guys. I couldn't really pull off like a full random RPG Maker for this month. So I'm instead going to have like a free-form ramble about ones I won't play on the marathon. And some of these it's because I didn't like them, some of these it's because I really liked them, but I've already played them. Some of them are mysterious third reasons, such as being asexual. Basically, from the start, I have to eliminate like any sexually explicit or particularly fan servicey games. This includes stuff like Yumi Nikki, Corpse Party, Lisa the Painful. All games that I have on good opinion from many people are really, really, really great, but they're just not the kind of thing I can handle. Any ones that have been in this marathon which have had that kind of stuff, it was entirely accidental and I didn't know it was like that going in. And the same for any like severe horror games or ones with a lot of gore. That's not also related to my sexuality. I just have a really weak stomach for like jump scares and stuff because I have anxiety problems in real life. Unfortunately, a lot of the best RPG Maker games are horror, so if you have a fave and you've noticed like a suspicious absence of it, that's probably the reason. I also want to say up front that you're totally entitled to having your own opinions. If you see like one of the ones I said I dislike and you're like, oh, that Bonford's so stupid, that game is great, like, trust me, my opinion is not taken away from yours. You have every right to disagree with me. For all I know, I could be the one with a shitty opinion. And I might have missed something that you really loved about it. I would be totally happy to hear your comments. And if you want to go off and watch somebody else playing that game, or you want to make your own videos about it, that'd be really cool and I'd support you all the way. And so now let's move into those lists. I think it'd be more enjoyable to start with the positive stuff first. So here we go. Fave games I can't play for this. Ib or Ebe, that really famous one, and it's absolutely as great as everyone set it up with. I cried so much about Gary. The unique art style is really appealing and cool. The gameplay is interesting. I'm not a fan of horror games. It's still really engaging because it's more of like a psychological plot. You really care about the characters and you want to get them out safe. A lot of the puzzles were really confusing for me, but I'm just really bad at puzzle games in general, so I don't know. It was much more accessible than Alice Mare was. I never really, I did, have to look at a guide sometimes, but I never really felt like it's ruining my immersion entirely. I have to check the guide every 5 seconds. Basically, if you played Alice Mare and you want something like that but good, go for Ebe. It also has multiple endings, and it's really cool different ways it can go. You will cry if you get the one where something bad happens to Gary. Oh my god. It really adds a lot to this kind of lonely, sad RPG Maker horror to have a supporting character that you really get attached to. I would go so far to say Gary is one of the best characters in all of RPG Maker history, especially the classic RPG Maker era. So many other games in this genre don't have any kind of supporting character. It's just you alone and you're a silent protagonist and there's no real actual story reason to care. Which, can I just say, as another reason I'm not going to be reviewing The Witch's House. That one, I couldn't get into it myself. I ended up quitting before seeing the really cool twist ending. So I will say that I did go and watch a Let's Play, and the twist ending is really cool, but it's really, really sadistic and sad and awful and evil. It's a really well executed, sad, awful, evil twist that nothing you did mattered and you actually made everything worse. But the way it's revealed is really surprising and you never would have guessed it coming, and I think it does have value in that sense. And because it's a horror game, it makes sense. The ultimate horror in the end is realising that the world would have been better off if you never started playing the game, and you've just doomed all the characters you cared about. Well, you don't really care about the characters, you don't really know the characters, but that's the thing, it's it still made you care, even if the characters are nothing but basic tropes of girl who loves her dad and wants to escape to get back to her dad. It really hits your heart when you realise what exactly is going on with that situation and what happens with the dad. Oh my dear fucking lord. My emotions were, let's just say, blasted into several parts and leave it at that. But unfortunately that one, the reasons that made me stop it was overly confusing puzzles, really needing a guide, and really punishing puzzles too. It's one of those ones where literally every 5 seconds there's a fake trap that'll kill you, and you have to constantly be saving, you have to constantly be checking a guide, and it's just not my personal kind of enjoyable gameplay. But the game is still good, and I did regret that I stopped playing once I found out if I'd kept on going there would have been a really interesting ending. Even if that ending would have depressed me so much and made me wish I hadn't played in the first place. But in a positive sense, because I was what I was intending to do. I hope this makes sense. It's really hard to not spoil what happens. Off is another game I already played and completed. Off is a game with impeccable vibes, cool story, amazing art style, but the battle system and the puzzles are just really, really confusing and bad. I wasn't able to complete it on my first run through. I just ended up being again, stuck to the point where you have to use a guide for every single thing, and I was I'm not really enjoying it anymore. I'm going to put it down. I'm going to watch like the famous Markiplier Let's Play, and then I watch the famous Markiplier Let's Play, and I'm like, wow, what a great fucking game, what a great story, but I never want to play it. But good news for you all, it's getting a remake. At the time I'm recording this, the remake is upcoming, it hasn't come out yet, so I don't know if it's great or not. But the trailer specifically said they're changing the battle system entirely, so fingers crossed they'll really nail it on the second try. It's also one of those ones which has, like, the classic, like, really, really bad ending in the last 5 seconds as a sudden surprise, but I feel like Off is, like, the queen of that. Like, it really pulls it off in a way that no others have actually managed. It doesn't make you feel like your whole adventure was pointless. It feels like actually what they're going for is, like, an emotional, a really thought-provoking moment which makes you sit and think, and it's because the game actually gives you the choice of whether you want to do the sudden bad thing at the end, and you can get like a bittersweet ending where like it's still too far gone, you've still had this horrible twist happen and you can't undo it, but you've saved at least one life in the end, and that really, really hit me really hard, and I'll pick that ending every time. It's also hard to talk about without spoilers, but like the ending has like a meaning, it links into the plot of the rest of the game, it makes some interesting commentary on like the meta relationship between like player and character. It doesn't feel like a lazy cop-out, it feels like what the entire game was building towards. Oh, also Enoch Gang. I care, you big mister! Surprisingly, since I started recording this video, it was suddenly announced that Toby Fox is going to be doing the soundtrack for the new remake. The guy who made Undertale. And apparently Undertale was inspired by Off in the first place, and he's super excited to be working on like one of his favourite games from his childhood. So I think I'm fully confident that the new music is going to be nothing to worry about, it's going to be amazing. Your Turn to Die, Deaf Game by Majority. I'm really interested in this because it's like Danganronpa but actually good. As someone who is like a fan of Danganronpa, like most people in the fandom really dropped off of it after V3. That's really appealing, and the idea, apparently it brings back like the rejected idea of the first Danganronpa where your choices would affect who dies and there'd be different branching routes. This game actually does that, and it's really fascinating. I also really, really like the art style, there's loads of cool character designs I like, but that gets into the reason why I'll never play it is, would you believe out of all the characters, there's only 2 which will die no matter what you do and cannot be saved no matter what, and by some cruel coincidence they picked my absolute fave to kill off brutally at like the start of chapter 1, and then like runner-up pick dies even more traumatically 5 seconds later, and I'm just like looking around the room and being like, who can I guess like settle on as one I kind of vaguely care about? And I'm just like, I don't really want to play the game like this. So yeah, that was just, I played the game and I immediately got put off and I never went back to it. Sorry. I did at least like the spin-off game where the guy who dies first, my obvious favourite, he gets to be like the main character in a side story mode, and that was really nice and sweet, but it also just ends on a cliffhanger with nothing really resolved, so yeah. It's probably leading up into whenever the final chapter comes out, because that's the second reason why I haven't played it is the game isn't complete yet. It's like it releases chapter by chapter over a really long time, and every chapter has had like a much longer time to come out than the last, because understandably, if you have to handle the branches of like so many different people could be dead or alive at this point, it means every chapter takes much more writing than the previous one. I don't envy the job of this developer, but I'm really, really proud of what they're doing, and I'm really glad they've committed so much to like making a great experience for the players. So anyway, you go and enjoy the game for me. And I just hope you get better luck than your favourite guy dying horribly in the first 5 seconds and just, yeah. I know someone had to die to be the tutorial, but why did you make us such an interesting character? It kind of makes me wish we went back to games where like the guy who was just for sacrifice for the first 5 seconds was very obvious and you didn't really care about him, because this shows why making it like a genuine pick of a character who seemed like they had potential is just like, it can be bad in its own way. Another one I won't be playing, not because it's bad, because I don't like it, it's because I literally physically cannot play it. It's only available in German, Vampire's Dawn, and this one is a classic, I really like it, but I've experienced it through like a screenshot let's play where someone translated all the text out. So I'm putting a recommendation on screen of who it was that did that, and in the description of where to find that. It's really, really good, it's really comprehensive. The person like goes into like the development details, why the translation didn't happen, this and that, and even like goes into the game files to find out why certain glitches happen. Loads of really interesting stuff. It's also really cool, it's one of the earliest RPGmaker games, and it's also really cool to see ones from a different country, because honestly not a lot of ones from different European countries ever get translated to English. We have a better rate of getting Japanese ones translated. The game itself I wouldn't say is necessarily the best, it's more like really corny and endearing in that kind of way. It's just your absolute classic, like edgy 14-year-old story that would be made at that time. Because I really, really like it. It just appeals to that child in my heart. It has, I guess, a kind of thing that Choose Wisely has, but like more and better. It's like, you can see there's flaws here, but every flaw is like funny bad instead of bad bad. But it's also makes for a game that is genuinely good in a bunch of other ways. It has like so many different like experimental systems that must have been really hard to program in like the early RPGmaker engines. Like you can go around, you can feed on any NPC in the map and different things will happen if you have like a plot important one or this and that. And you manage like your blood points and you get this different skill inheritance system, different branching endings for like your, I think what was it, like your love points and your manliness points or something like that. I also really liked that the main evil vampire guy was like dark skinned, and I really dislike that in the sequels they gave him a more generic Sephiroth design. Apparently the only reason he looked like that in the first game was because of limited sprites, and like the dark elf was the closest thing they had to like a long-eared vampire. And I'm like, please stick with it, it was genuinely better. Like, if you accidentally did representation because of an art error, please go back. So anyway, I'm putting up, like, here's my hypothetical redesign if they had kept the design. I think I've already shown this when I blabbered on about this in the previous video, but I'm compiling it here for people who probably don't have the time to watch every single random RPG maker. Another game is OneShot, which is actually a game I really, really liked, but I can't really do it for a nostalgic revisit because I played it, like, less than 3 years before I started the marathon. I've kind of put off replaying it again because it's still so fresh in my memory. It is a game that really sticks with you. But I'm sure whenever I do replay it, I'll enjoy it just as much. It's been a remake since then, so maybe I'll enjoy it even more. I will, however, say I didn't like any of like the meta computer stuff in the game. It kind of felt like it was tacked on just to have it, and it didn't really like mesh with the tone or the story or anything. And it's because the original origins of the game, the reason it has that name is it first came out as like a freeware game, and it's called OneShot because you had to play it in like one setting, and once you got an ending, that you could never play the game ever again. It would like put a file on your computer which would let you never make a new save file. And in that version of the game, from what I've heard, the meta stuff was a lot more like present and part of the plot, and it led into the theme, which the theme was like you only get one chance. And then every later version of the game has like removed that entirely, but kind of kept it like as like vestigial elements of what was originally there. And that's why I kind of just felt like, oh, this stuff is just getting in the way, and it's like, it just kind of made puzzles more difficult to solve for no real net gain. It also made the game really hard to port to other consoles, and apparently that's why the remake happened, is it's just impossible to port to consoles because it relies so much on being on like a desktop. So on the Switch version, they made it like from the ground up, they made like a virtual desktop environment with like a whole like unique made up interface and stuff like that, and then that version was then ported back to Steam as the new remake. It's really interesting as an origin. Anyway, the reasons why I love this game is entirely about the plot and nothing about the gameplay. I'm sorry, I know I'm going to be torn apart the internet by saying anything bad about this game. And just trust me, I love it just as much as you do, even if I have one complaint. I just have poor patience for like point and click combine the items puzzles. I'm just really bad at them. Especially when you have to backtrack across such a big map. But anyway, story, reason why it's great is the one meta thing which actually relates to the plot and is good is you, the person, are talking directly to the character. You are not playing as the character, you are like a guiding force which is telling the character what to do. It has that same appeal of Eve. You're like, the whole thing is about bonding with one really, really good supporting character, but it's like, you are literally doing it. You're inserting yourself into the game. You're sending messages to Nico, the adorable non-binary cat person who's like thrown into this world they don't understand, they have to save it at great personal cost. And it just hits my heart so much how well written all the conversations are between you and them, how you can like comfort them in a time of need, how sad it is to never be able to like actually reach out to them, to only have your words reach. How every time you close the game and you reload your save file, you get like a memory of their past life and their sadness, and then being like, it took so long for you to come back, I was so scared, and it really, really, really hits my heart. The whole game is basically just about like being a good parental figure to this scared child who is not prepared to be like a JRPG hero. And you're playing in like almost an almost post-apocalyptic world, like a right on the edge of the apocalypse world. There's so few people and they're struggling so hard. The majority of people who are alive are like monsters and robots, and like so much of civilization is gone. as a justification for why the maps are so big and empty, it does make sense. And it does give the game such an immaculate atmosphere with the great music, the great illumination effects of glowing algae is like the only light they have left in this world because the sun is going out, and that's why what Nico's goal is. They have to deliver this light bulb to be the new sun. It's all really dream logic, and it's really great, and I love it. And there's great reveals of exactly why it's so dream logic in the end, and the secret ending. I really recommend it. It's one of those cases where, like, I've heard people arguing that the whole point of the game was, like, in the original version there was only, like, 2 endings and they're both bad and there's no true ending. And, like, I don't agree with people saying that was better because I get it. Again, it's meaningful. It's showing that, like, sometimes there's no good choices, but also the way they wrote the true ending in the second version is just, it's so good and it's so fascinating and explains so many, like, plot threads left hanging if you don't see it, that I can't imagine a version where it doesn't exist. I greatly recommend it. Plus, I really still do get the emotional thing of, like, I'm making 2 terrible choices, I'm going to see the consequences of my terrible choice, and, like, personally, the fact that you can then go back and see the other ending doesn't in any way, like, make me feel less guilty for this. If anything, seeing both of them makes me feel, like, more guilty, more sad, more determined to find, like, a better, different way, because now I know that no matter what I choose, someone is going to be super fucking sad. Whereas, honestly, if I played the first version and I only got one shot, I might think, like, oh, I've picked the wrong ending and there was a good ending, as opposed to knowing that there isn't a good ending, unless you do this crazy secret stuff to find out. To find out, basically, like, the question of what you choose in the first place was totally wrong, and there is, like, a whole different world of reasons why the world is how it is, and it's so good. It's genuinely really good. Like, it's not meta stuff, but it's, like, meta in universe, if that makes any sense. It doesn't break the fourth wall, but it breaks the logic of how you think the world works, and it's so good. Really recommend. I recommend you play it and you fucking cry. You cry 10 times. You cry more times than I cried. Let's make a competition of it. Just as an example of how much I love this game, I got so attached to the lamplighter that I waited 3 real-world days to allow him to be able to solve the puzzle on his own. There's one point in the game where he tries to solve a puzzle by, like, manually guessing every single number between 1 and, like, 6 million. And you're supposed to go off and solve it yourself, but I just felt like, I believe in you, you can do it! And I was so pleasantly surprised that if you do wait long enough, he does actually do it, and you get, like, a little extra bonus cutscene of, like, Nico being proud of him, and I'm like, yay! I've bought the same t-shirt, like, 3 times from the Fangamer store. They have a plushie now. There's, like, you will get so attached to Nico, and if you don't, then I don't understand you, I'm sorry. It's not a full 10 out of 10, but it's definitely like an 8 or an 8.5. Right up there in, like, my list of top 10 RPGmaker games of all time. And then, why am I dead at sea? This is a game I've played before and I really enjoyed, but I genuinely do not know if it's RPGmaker or not. I couldn't find a source on the internet anywhere telling me. It's a cool game, gives me a lot of similar vibes to, like, Earthbound mixed with Ghost Trick. You play as, well, someone who died at sea, and you've got to go around doing puzzles as, like, a little spirit thing, possessing different people, finding different memories, in order to uncover the story of who you were and how you died. And potentially save this really sad little child along the way. That was my one flaw of it, though, is that the game kind of, by the end, it becomes like, oh, the mystery's been solved, and then we don't really care about the character reactions to it. You don't really get much of a resolution for your main character. You don't even really know if they pass on in the end. They kind of just stop being there mid-cutscene, and the game forgets to give them an ending. And I think that's the problem with trying to do a game like this with a silent protagonist. In the end, it really does just feel like the point is to solve the mystery rather than caring about the character. But I did still really care about Paolo, and that's why I felt sad that he is also sidelined in the ending, and I found that really strange. Like, to me, the big emotional resolution would have been, I've saved Paolo. But instead it's just, I've solved a mystery, and now it's over. It's a bit abrupt and wasn't really long enough to make me satisfied as a true ending, and then the untrue ending has horrible things happen to Paolo that makes me really sad. But the rest of the game leading up to the ending is really cool. The twist of the mystery is really cool. There's loads of interesting stuff. Characters, there's commentary on racism, classism. There's, like, a guy who's, like, a paedophile running, like, a sex slave ring, and it's really chilling because you can never predict who it's going to be. You go in distrusting all these characters, and you have to figure out, like, who is genuine, who has a really big secret. Like, you find the secret, like, who does this apply to? It's all really interesting. Sometimes the controls do, like, glitch up a bit and you have to reset. But generally I was enjoying myself right up until the end. I just don't know if it's RPGmaker. And I cared about Paolo so much that even to this day I keep in my inventory a Paolo trading card that I will never ever trade. Also the Neurax worm. That's unrelated, I just really like the Neurax worm. And against my will, some kind of microtransaction item from Trove, which has been stuck in my inventory for like over 5 years, and I have no idea what the fuck Trove is. I've never played Trove. It just appeared one day in some kind of like Trove promotion event, and like now it just says unknown package, bunch of numbers. Apparently it's from 2018. Despite saying it's listing, it won't let me sell it. I can't unpack it because I don't have the game, and the game doesn't even seem to exist. I don't know. If anyone knows how to get rid of this thing, please tell me. But until that fated day, that's enough off-topic rambling. And then any Pokemon RPGmaker fan games, like, I've played loads of those. I feel like they don't really fit into the requirements of random RPGmaker because, like, I feel like Pokemon Essentials and other similar things have gotten so complex that it's more like its own, like, sub-version of RPG Maker. Like, they've basically turned the thing into a different engine, and I feel like it wouldn't be doing justice to just lump them in with everything else. If I ever did that, I want to make its own separate series in the future, like, I don't know, Pokemon Essentials Showcase. If there's a demand for that, tell me in the comments and maybe I'll try it. Section 2, things I have mixed feelings on, or like other different reasons why I couldn't play, but I don't think they're bad games or anything. Another game I'm never going to play is Omori. That's just because right as soon as the game came out, like, loads of my friends were playing it, everyone on Twitter was talking about it. I had the ending spoiled for me in like 5 seconds, so I don't think it's going to have as much emotional weight for me. Also, the ending was spoiled in the context of many people saying, like, it was a huge flame war over whether the ending was good or really, really bad. And I'm like, looking at what people are saying, I think I'm probably going to be on the side of, like, the ending is indeed poorly handled and could have been done better. Like, I've looked into the debug stuff on the cutting room floor about how the ending could have been different. I'm like, oh, that would have made it so much better. I think definitely I'm going to play this and I'm going to just feel let down and feel, yeah. And also people saying it's a really, 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 really long game for an RPG Maker game, and a lot of it is padding quests in like the Headspace world. So again, I feel like it's probably not well suited for me. I have a short attention span and I agree that the ending sounds bad, but for all I know, maybe people have been explaining it poorly and it's better in game. But I'm never going to find out because I just have no interest whatsoever in playing it. But I do agree that the battle system looks really cool and creative, and maybe if I ever find like a demo or something, I'll play it just to see how the battles go, but that's pretty much the only thing that interests me. Aside from that, watching other people's videos and analysing the plot, I'm like, yeah, I really wish I could enjoy this, but not my kind of thing. Another horror one I already played when I was younger is Mad Father. I played a lot of horror games when I was younger because that was before when you had trigger warnings, and like, I wouldn't have sought these out on purpose. But thankfully none of these were really, really excessive. Mad Father is like, it's a weird halfway point between being genuinely scary and being so bad it's funny. And don't take it as me just being rude, even the official translator for it put it like that. Apparently they put a few extra jokes in the translation to add to that. The famous, where someone says father as fat her, that wasn't a translation mistake, that was an intentional joke. At the time it was a fan translation, they didn't have the permission to officially translate it. They do have the permission now for like the several remakes of the game. I haven't played those, but apparently the translation is a bit more like closer to the original text in those. But anyway, Mad Father, it's another classic RPG Maker horror where you just kind of run around a scary place and there's an overly negative, manipulative, awful twist in the end. Apparently the remakes add some things to slightly change that and make it better or worse depending on your opinion. But I really didn't like a twist in the end. It made it feel like everything was pointless, and also I just really don't like the idea of like evil runs genetically in the blood and you're destined for it or something. Quite obviously, as an autistic person who was often treated as like, oh, you're just an evil, awful child, you were just born wrong. I don't tend to believe in the idea. Like, I tend to believe more in the idea like if a kid is misbehaving and doing weird stuff, they might have like an illness that they need help with, or they might be like a delinquent getting the wrong influences from someone that they could figure it out with help, psychological help, and just, yeah, but that's going off topic. Mad Father is just one of those ones I write away as like, I didn't personally like it, but I see why other people liked it. It's probably just me not really liking the horror genre, especially not liking really bad endings to games. But I did feel a lot for, at the time I played it, because I played the first version, we had no name for this character, so the fandom called him Dio, because it was an in-joke, but he looks kind of like the younger form of like the JoJo villain, but then nothing alike, he's actually a good guy. But like the ambiguous, like maybe he's a ghost, maybe he's just injured kid who's like, he mysteriously helps you out, and like there's a tragic ending for him in the end, but there's other secret endings and there's sequel bait, and like, I really liked him, and it does add again what I said about Ib. Having a prominent side character who is like actually good and you actually care about makes you feel a lot more in these horror games as opposed to just, I'm a silent person wandering around doing not much in particular. Oh, also the protagonist isn't silent, she has a lot of opinions on stuff. Even though her opinions are comically bad, she trusts her obvious mad father, who's obviously obvious from the fucking title of the game. And all these flashbacks and then he taught me how to use a mini chainsaw. I was just, yeah. I would say it's better to play Misao by the same creator. I think it handles better with it feels more intentional, the comedic aspects added into it, and they're used to contrast with the darkness in interesting ways. There's also a cool thing of if you pick on the male or female version of the protagonist, they have different personalities. The male one reacts like a normal person would, is horrified by everything. The female one reacts in weird ways, she's all chipper about the evil stuff going on about her, and there's a reveal she might be half demon, and it's really cool and interesting. They both still have flaws, they both still have moments where the dark tone is ruined by something funny, but it feels like it's part of the experience in that one. Also, I just prefer the art style. The Crooked Man and Psychonoiac, or whatever it's called, by the same developer. Played both of them, again during the point where I played loads of horror RPG Maker games without realising. But it turned out neither of those are actually RPG Maker, they're Wolf RPG Editor. So they wouldn't be admissible for the marathon anyway. My verdict on both of them is they're both interesting concepts ruined by the developer, purposefully trying to make it really, really hard to get the good ending. You have to make completely illogical choices, saying a nasty thing to someone who's suicidal, and saying, oh, the monster is real, it isn't a hallucination, but it actually is a hallucination, and in that ending you find out it's a hallucination. But if you say it's not a hallucination, it turns out it's real. And just stuff like that where there's no way you could have logically realised what you're supposed to do, and it just exists to make you have to go back and try again. I don't know if it's meant to be just an artificial way of inflating the playtime, or if a developer thought it was really deep to make it deliberately confusing, but the later games in the Man series get better about it. I just haven't played any of them because I didn't really enjoy the first one. One thing I do have to give it credit for is the ending is really, really, really good. I love the uplifting messages it had about mental illness, suicidal feelings, and finding sympathy for the villain in your own way, setting him free from the role he's imposed on himself, and saving the protagonist from falling into that same trap. Trying to be vague on the details here, but I did really like it, and I legit cried. It's quite rare for endings to make me cry as much as this one did. It's just such a shame that so much leading up to it very almost made me stop playing. I'm so glad I didn't, but yeah. It's especially bad because these weird choices, they take you out of the immersion, and the immersion is the entire thing. You are getting really emotional over this story, and then it just hurts to do what you thought was an empathetic choice and be told, no, you need to be harsher to depressed people to get the good ending. I don't think it was an intentional message. I think it was just a developer wasn't really thinking about it. It was let's make it a really, really difficult decision to get so the player will see more of my bad endings. But yeah, it does end up accidentally being at odds with the main message of the game. It was enough to make me go and play one other game by the developer, but then I realised this is a recurring problem from them, and I'm just probably not going to like any of the games if I keep on doing it. But again, you can go on Manly Badass Hero, Markiplier, all the people famous for playing famous RPG Maker games. Even though this isn't an RPG Maker game, they've also done this. Go ahead and enjoy them. So, the final section, ones I just outright didn't like. Ashes of Immortality, that was in the same bundle I got Choose Wisely in, if I remember correctly. This one I played 5 seconds of, and I was what's going on? It's below the level you'd expect for an alpha demo. It was really confusing. Dumped into what felt like a test room, and you just need to wander around and figure out what's going on with no guidance whatsoever. And I just spent a really long time not figuring out how to get the main plot started, and I just was I'm not having fun. I haven't really seen anything that's beyond the bare minimum for RPG Maker. I'm going to put this down. For all I know, maybe it gets better later on. But from the mixed reviews, and in fact, it's such a warning sign whenever these Steam pages have the acclaimed game, the great game, the 16-bit classic. It's you can just say that. You're the guy who created it. You can just say your game is great, and nobody has any idea whether it's an actual review from someone else or you just made it up. So I just take it as a warning sign. Whenever a game says it's great, it probably isn't. And then there was a third one in that bundle, which I can't remember for the life of me what it was called. Unfortunately, I can't check, because of how Steam works. When I wanted to delete Choose Wisely from my account, it only gave the option to delete the whole bundle. It was something where the stated premise was you play as an abstract spirit that possesses different people in a town to solve a mystery. And then I was so confused because none of that was actually in the game. It just kind of drops you in. And it just felt like a really generic RPG, and I was when's it going to get to that happening? And it didn't. So I dropped both of those before I even had the idea for the marathon, but then once I did think it up, I thought, Morty Odds Choose Wisely is going to be equally as bad, so it should definitely be the first one I play, and then I'm so glad that it was. I didn't manage to find which game that was, but looking at the company that published Choose Wisely on Steam, it seems it's a current incarnation of that one website I saw which hosted a whole bunch of different games that weren't all made by the same person. I thought it would just be really funny to see how long it takes to scroll through all of them. It seems to be a very spotty mess of some of the bad games we've played, some games which were good like ORPG, and some I have no idea. Another one I won't play because I played before is Richard and Alice, and I also didn't really enjoy that one. It's got such a cool idea, and for most of the game, like, it's really building up, and it makes you think that there is going to be some cool twist or ending. So it's a post-apocalyptic world, but it's an unusual type of one. It's one where climate change has happened, the world has permanently been stuck in snow, and because of it, society has collapsed, like we can't grow crops, we can't make food and stuff. And you play as two characters, obviously Richard and Alice. I'll just say, unfortunately, it's one of those ones where the ending kind of ruins it. Which is surprising because it has multiple endings. It's like the multiple endings all kind of ruin it. I'm going to try and avoid specific spoilers, but basically one of the characters, you find out their backstory is like they had a son who died horribly, was like killed by raiders, and the other one of the two characters was part of that raider group and was responsible for it. It's like a big betrayal, like one of the two characters that you've got attached to this whole time was evil. And then what I really don't like is how the multiple endings play out. Is you do actually have an ending to like take revenge on them and be like, yeah, screw you, I'm not going to forgive you just because we're like the only two people left alive. And the thing is that ending is framed kind of like a bad ending, and then the good ending, quote unquote, is like you forgive them because you are the only two people left alive, and it's like, I'm just too tired and there's no point anymore, even if I avenge you, nothing will happen. The other person doesn't even like redeem themselves for what they did or really apologise. It's just kind of like, okay, I guess it's over, I won't be mad at you for a thing that I'm really justified to be mad at you about, because either way we're both gonna die alone and cold in the snow. So I may as well just like pretend it didn't happen and pretend that we do have the romance I thought we were having. And I guess maybe the intent was like to let the player decide which was the good or the bad ending. Like, do you want to live in ignorance? Do you want to face the sad truth even though there's nothing you can do to change it? But the execution didn't really pull off that moral, I guess. Like, at most, all we get is both endings are equally shit. There isn't really the moral ambiguity in it. And at worst, it does seem like it's pushing you to, like, the ignorance ending is the good ending. But I can't say for sure because I don't know if there's been any development statements on it, as that's just the tone of how it was written. The whole game from the start was bleak and depressing, but it felt like it was building up towards this cool twist. And then the cool twist happened, and it was really emotionally effective, and it just, like, it's over now. And everything you felt kind of meant nothing, and there's no good endings. Like every option, it is just you choose between like 5 different bad endings. It was a bit way too much for me, even with how bleak the rest of the game already was. I wouldn't say overall it's a bad game. Like, I appreciate what they were going for. They had like fairly decent like mouse control compatibility. Oh man, you really know I'm scraping the bottom of the barrel when that's the praise I have to give it. But yeah, I do like the world building, I like the concept they were going for. It just felt that the main story that they had tying it all together wasn't really very solid, and the interest was more in just exploring this interesting world and concept and characters. The character who was not secretly evil all along, was very interesting and investing and cared a lot about their story, but then, yeah. Also, I just felt the one who turns out to be evil was, like, really, like, stereotypically written with, like, no redeeming characteristics and just kind of, like, we don't even get much of a reason why they did such an evil thing. It is just the big reveal, and now the game is over and we're not going to explore it. To be honest, the child was written really flat too. It was just 100% like Hollywood stereotype of a 5-year-old. No real actual personality except just the most heartstring tugging things, and you can tell instantly from the first moment he's introduced he's going to die. I would hypothetically feel emotions for this story. I know I should, rather than actually getting invested enough to feel it. If you're interested in playing and you want to explore it, go in knowing that twist and expecting it, and don't get your hopes up. You probably would enjoy it more if you didn't expect it to be more enjoyable than it is. I don't like To the Moon, and I feel really guilty that I don't like To the Moon. I outright hate To the Moon, and I think it's because I'm an autistic person. I've seen so many people say, like, great autism representation, it really talks about the autism, but the way it talks about it is bad. And I don't get it. I don't get why it's so praised. I genuinely wonder if it's being praised by people who don't have autism, or maybe I just have different opinions on good autism representation. Maybe it's a cultural difference. I don't know. But I just know that to me it's like, wow, this is a really promising, interesting game that hooked me in the first 5 minutes, and then as soon as the plot got to the autism, I absolutely just despised the grandpa character for how he treated his autistic wife. Absolutely wanted to just shake him through the screen. And I got my hope up because it seemed in the first scene when they reveal it seemed like it was maybe intentionally supposed to be seen as him being bad to her, but then they just don't resolve it, and it is just like, it's really hard to talk about without spoilers, but let's just put it summarised, like, why did you not talk to your autistic wife about this thing for over 50 years? Why did you just treat it like, there's no way I could possibly understand her, I can't figure out what she means, but you could just ask her, and it seems so obvious to me as an autistic person. My wife keeps giving me an origami rabbit every morning, and I don't know why, and I've just chosen to never ask her ever, and to just write it off as a weird thing she does because of the autism. And like, now until on my deathbed after she's died, I'm gonna call these magical dream memory people to figure out what she really meant, when I could have talked to her at any point in over 50 years. You get it, it's a premise that has to exist to justify the plot happening, but in the way of making that happen, they've made a premise which makes the character look like an arsehole, or an idiot, or both. Because also the way he acts is like, the really creepy scene which I thought was intentionally meant to be him being creepy, it was meant to be a moment of like, oh, he really treated his wife bad and that's going to be the twist, is when he was younger, I found that the only reason he decided to date her in the first place is because, oh, she's really interesting because of how she's autistic and she keeps getting all these things wrong. He like blew her up in his mind to like a manic pixie dream girl idea of like, oh, she just goes to the beat of her own drum, she's so against society. It was, you know, like, what will she do for me? She'll spice up my life, she'll brighten things up. And it was treated like he never really saw her as a person, and the whole time he was like faking liking her just to like get this thing he wanted in his life. And at the moment in that scene it's portrayed as really bad, but then we just go straight back to like, oh, but of course 50 years later he must really love her because he asked us to do this memory thing, and then we just never really address what he did, and we never really deal with it. It's just taken as granted that like, he does love her now, so let's never talk about it. And it was like, why does this big dramatic reveal scene exist if you're not going to do anything with it in the plot? It does nothing except to make me doubt the love that is necessary to believe to make the plot actually matter in any way. I also really especially hate how that scene is revealed by having like a different autistic person who has like different symptoms being like trying to explain to him why what he's thinking is wrong. Is like, it's not like she's just trying to be strange and quirky on purpose to appeal to people. Like, maybe she doesn't want to be weird, maybe she is trying her best and this is just how she naturally is. It was like another person, one of her friends being like, I'm autistic too, but I work my entire life to mask and to pretend I'm not. And she doesn't, and that's why I really admire her, because she's able to be herself, but also the disadvantage is, because she's being herself, it means people will treat her worse, and like, it's like, erase the interesting question of like, which is the better way to handle it. Should you be like, open and proud of yourself as an autistic person, but risk being treated awful, or should you hide away, but risk the emotional damage of like, now I don't know how to unmask, I don't even know who I am under the mask, and again, really interesting topics that were raised and then went nowhere, and it was just written off because we're playing from the perspective of the grandpa guy in his memories rather than any of these interesting autistic people. And instead where that scene goes, if you are thinking that I'm being ridiculous by thinking it's a negative depiction of autism, they have this weird, just off-topic break in the plot to say, oh, don't say neurotypical, that's a slur against non-autistic people. And I'm just like, what the actual fuck? Like, what the fuck else do you want me to say? It's like cisgender, it's not a slur, it's literally just saying, like, the opposite of trans. Like, what else do you want me to say? The reason people have this weird assumption it must be a negative term is because they're so used to saying, like, normal and trans, normal and autistic, and it's like, we're just trying to raise, like, a genuine point that calling us not normal makes us feel, like, left out, and it makes sense to just make a new word for what you are saying the word normal for. Like, you don't mean normal, you mean not this. So we've just made a word that means not this. And then you're so resistant to using it, and you make up this bizarre shit. Like, you can't just decide things are a slur when they've not been used negatively ever. It's just bizarre. And that was the moment that made me realise, oh, this person doesn't actually understand autism. They've, like, Googled things, and they've gotten really wrong information, probably from Tumblr, because this was a game that was very popular on Tumblr and very made for Tumblr. And just, at the time, there was a lot of stuff like that. It's also worth pointing out how the game itself never says the word autistic. It was confirmed as canon by the developers, but just for perspective, the game never says autistic, but it does say neurotypical entirely to mention how much it hates the word neurotypical. It doesn't even say like neurodiverse or neuroatypical. And the wife she is just a plot point. That's why I don't believe it when it tried to critique how he was acting, because she is treated like that by the plot. She is just the mysterious reason. How can we uncover the mysterious thing that she didn't say? Because you didn't ask her. Generally, it's one of the most feeble, bases for a plot I've ever seen, and nobody seems to... It really made me realise how different non-autistic people are and how they see us. I've seen so many people be like, oh, how could he deal with that, her being so hard to communicate with, and not seeing as he's not trying to communicate with her because he's already written her off as impossible to communicate with. And again, that makes me not believe that he did warm up to her and genuinely love her after the 50 years, if he's just treating her as someone who he can never talk to and will never try, and just... He almost infantilizing her sometimes. It's really fucked up. I really didn't like the scene of we're taking her to get horse therapy because horse therapy helps you be less autistic or act less autistic or helps autistic people have less symptoms. It felt so patronizing. One, that's not what horse therapy means, and two, it's just really, it was the most cringe thing I've ever seen. This uplifting music as this grown adult woman rides a horse, and it's wow, it's the first time she's ever been to emotionally relate to a character. You can't even see it. It's curing her, it's healing her to ride a horse. It wasn't even learning to take care of a horse helps you to be able to relate to an animal which you don't have to talk to, so it would help with a social disability. It literally is just riding a horse will somehow affect your mental health. And I guess it would if you enjoy riding a horse, but that's the same effect anyone would get from it, autistic or not. That's what horse therapy is. It literally is just walking a dog, having a pet cat. It is literally just playing with an animal can help you feel better when you're depressed. That's what it is. And it's applied to autistic people too, because obviously logically helping to take care of a pet, an animal, something which doesn't talk is going to help a lot if you can't talk or you have difficulty socializing. I can have this emotional connection with someone else. I can learn how to take care of them, how to empathize without having to actually get over the hurdle of not being able to talk very well. But it's also it's something you do with children. It's something you do with literal children. And this is when she's 21, after they've already started dating, after he's proposed to her. And he's still oh, she never talks to me, I don't really understand her, and I just want to be with her because she's so quirky. But now I see that her quirkiness has its downsides. What can I do to possibly fix this? I'll go ask somebody else to do literal child therapy on her instead of just talking to her. It's genuinely people think because autistic people have difficulty with certain types of socialization that you shouldn't even try to talk to us, and it's just I 100% believe that it's not the wife's fault in any way. She was not having a communication difficulty about this fucking origami rabbit. You, sir, were having a communication difficulty. I really don't like it. It really gets me peeved off. And especially how she only exists to be used as fuel for this twist about the grandpa's backstory. He had some kind of secret that he forgot with an amnesia as a child because a medication backfired because of somebody in his life died, blah blah blah, and she was trying to tell him the secret but secretly before he lost his memory, he'd met her one time before as a kid and they made origami rabbits together, and she was oh no, he doesn't remember this big part of our childhood, I will try and remind him with the origami rabbits we made together. And you can say, why didn't she say, why don't you remember that? But she is at the disadvantage. She's the one with social anxiety. She's the one who worries, what's going to happen? If he doesn't realise he hasn't remembered, is he going to think I'm crazy while saying it? And, how do I phrase this question to correctly ask, have you forgotten a massive part of your childhood? And it is genuinely a logical solution, at least from my artistic brain, to go, here is a thing that will remind you of the memory, let's see if it works. And just... If you can say to her, why didn't she just tell him that he's lost his memory? You can say to him, why didn't he just ask her why she was doing a weird origami thing? On both sides, they make stupid choices to not talk about this, but literally one of them has a disability and one of them doesn't. It's also not even a weird thing to give your husband a gift of an origami animal. I don't know about you, but my reaction wouldn't be, why is she doing such a weird thing? I'd be oh, that's really cute. But it's slightly weird how she's giving me the same animal every day. Maybe I'll ask her and I'll tell her that I have a different favourite animal. It could have been resolved so easily. Sorry, I'm getting really heated about this one because it really does hurt to see, like, what I feel is like a very harmful representation of people like me being, like, praised as one of the best RPG Maker games of all time, like, literally of all time. Also, the ending, that's a thing that even people who aren't me can agree on. It's just, like, really, really, like, weird. It's just like a definition of what they call on TV tropes an esoteric happy ending, where it's like it's clearly intended to be happy, but it just isn't when you think about it for more than 5 seconds. You know, what I was expecting to happen throughout the entire game is like these memory detective people are like finding out that they found the true answer, and now they're going to talk to the grandpa and tell him the true answer and settle his regrets of how he felt bad about not talking to his wife, and then he can pass on. I knew it was going to narratively be bittersweet because that's the whole thing, he's going to die soon, but they could have given him like genuine catharsis before that. Can you imagine in the first 5 minutes of the game, as soon as they drop the premise, that not being the ending? It's not the ending. Instead it's this weird fucking thing, this argument of like, corporate tells us we have to stick to the letter of the job exactly. We're not supposed to give him a happy death. We're only supposed to do what he literally wrote in the contract. We're supposed to artificially create a whole new memory of him being an astronaut. Because that's where the name comes from. It's like, to the moon was just a like key phrase related to his like lost amnesia memories. His wife tried extra hard to trigger them by like making an origami bunny that was like coloured like the moon. And in his last days of life he's been having like dreams about the moon, and he thinks it must some way be connected to his memories. But because the contract was phrased as take me to the moon, they have to literally do that. So you think like even this it has potential. You'd think the plot would be like corporate is making us do this and that's bad. Am I going to subvert it and tell him the truth, right? We're going to tell him the truth, right? But no, instead it's just like, corporate wants you to make up a memory where he's an astronaut and also his wife doesn't exist because she made him too sad. Let's just delete her out the memory so he can have his happy astronaut ending, which is literally not what he wanted. Like, neither him nor his wife even cared or liked space. So there's a conflict between, like, one of the heroes wants to do what corporate said because that's what we're getting paid for, and one of them wants to, like, subvert things in some way to make things happy, and then, the twist is, like, the one he thought was against it had a secret plan to supposedly make the memory truly happy anyway. And the thing he changed it to was a memory of, we didn't erase the wife, but you still have a false memory of being an astronaut. So then he just dreams he goes to the moon and he fucking dies. Congratulations, you gave this man zero conclusion to anything. You didn't get to reunite him with his genuine wife. You didn't even let him remember his genuine wife. You replaced the entire existence of his wife with just a different idea of what their life would have been. Genuinely at this point, can you even say he's the same man? You've essentially just like created an entirely new personality of a man whose like entire life went differently from age 15 to like 60. With his perfect idealised fake version of his wife who doesn't even act the same. Like, they met in a different way, he had a different life, the person who died in his amnesia just magically is undead now. His mother wasn't abusive anymore. And this is just portrayed as like a genuine kindness to do to him. It would be better than letting him face the reality of his real life. And I don't fucking agree with that. I would not want you to make up your own idea of a different me, and then give that guy a different happiness, which is not my definition of happiness. And I hate how much, like, mood whiplash it gave me, because it's presented in a way that's genuinely beautiful. They have loads of really great complex animations that are hard to do for RPG Maker. It's all synced perfectly to the music. You know that you are supposed to be crying, and you're supposed to think it's so beautiful and wonderful, and it's truly final, it ends the story, and instead it's the exact fucking opposite. But to be fair to the game, like, the post-ending stuff, it dropped some interesting hints. You thought, like, maybe the future sequels will, like, explore the moral ambiguity of what they've done a bit more. Ooh, maybe some of the things that happened were already taking place inside someone else's dream. Will they confront the corrupt company they're working for? Etc, etc, and sadly, even those really appealing things weren't enough to keep me still playing. Because I was just terrified the next game would repeat the same mistakes. And I do find it kind of noticeable that the first one is praised so highly and none of the sequels are, and nobody seems to have played them and nobody seems to know how it ends. From what I've heard, the second one, it doesn't outright go into, like, representing a disability. It has kind of a relatable disability experience. It's about, like, it's a reveal that a certain character doesn't really exist because they're an imaginary friend, and it's kind of, I guess, it's relatable a lot to the experience, like, people with dissociative identity disorder might end up. I don't know how it's handled. I'll just hope it's handled well and it's clear that it's not that. And I don't know what the third one is because no one's talked about it, and I hope it doesn't mean it gets even worse. But, yeah. That's my verdict. Really interesting idea of like delving into someone's memories to settle a long lost business and like let them die happily with a memory of how things could have gone differently if they'd made that one different decision. And like, it's just all ruined by the fact I don't want this guy to live happily. Like, genuinely, do you know how hard it is to make Bondford dislike a grandpa? With things like this, making the guy actually be someone you care about should be the highest priority. And I just care about the wife so much I wish I could visit her memory and help her. She's the one who needed this resolution. Like, he's just like, I'm mildly curious what my wife meant when she said the same thing. She's the one who was hurting for over 50 years, not knowing why he didn't remember her. Like, oh god, this could have been so much better. Sorry. I can't fault the developers for, like, I don't think they intentionally did this out of bigotry. I think it was just, we don't really understand what it is, and we've kind of folded a lot of different mental disabilities together into the same thing. I'm sorry, I don't have much more to say than that. I need to stop. That's why I'm not going to play it in a marathon, because that's a game I've played before and I'm not nostalgic for. In fact, I absolutely hate it and never want to touch it ever again. And every time I see anybody else talking about how great it is, I just get really, really, really sad. Okay, editing in post, revisiting my thoughts, trying to, like, I guess say it less angy. I want to make it clear that I don't think the developers, like, hate autism or intended any of this to be bad. It does feel like it was genuinely trying to be representation. I've done the research into it. The developers actually did, like, do a bunch of charity things donated to autism charities. That honestly made me feel a lot better. Because, like, even though I did think this is probably just, like, someone clueless who was trying their best, there was always a bit of my mind, like, was this really meant to be negative? Am I just being too naive? So I'm glad to know developers have done genuine good towards our community. So I just want to kind of express that, like, nobody is bad if they like the game. Nobody is bad if they'd rather settle for, like, imperfect representation rather than no representation. I am genuinely thankful that the developers tried. I just also think it's important to discuss how things could have been better, and it does frustrate me to see, like, nobody else on the internet bringing it up. But I do wish I could have figured out a way to, like, phrase it less angrily. So yeah, that's why I never want to play this game. If I struggled so much to stay, like, balanced and reasoned and unemotional, talking about it for 20 minutes, can you imagine how unfun it would be to watch Bonford shits on the game for 5 hours? So, there we go. That's the end. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you enjoyed at least something, and I hope this is a decent filler video while I'm gone.